clothes aren't straight.
Hi, and welcome to another conversation with Carrie and Dani. It's a wonderful Friday evening here in the States, and I think it's early Saturday morning there by Dani. We've got spring busyness here in the Midwest, and it's what coming on, is it fall there in
Yep,
New Zealand? Yep.
soon the leaves are just starting to change color on some of the early trees.
Yeah. So what's going on with you lately, Dani? I know that you've been busy dealing with some separate from our conversation stuff. So I just wondered if I could get an update and see how things were going for you.
Yes, I would like to talk about it. I want to talk about it because, there's things we've discussed on our show and we've discussed the impacts as best as we could. But every so often a story comes up that I think stories help us see things differently.
Hmm.
So I've had a really, things have been really tough lately. I've spent a lot of time supporting my brother. And so my brother he doesn't have an intellectual disability. According to the I don't know what you'd call the state or whatever, he doesn't have an intellectual disability. Um, but he actually does have an intellectual disability. He's got a very low IQ and he does need support to live and stuff. And mum went into a dementia unit last year, so we've been sorting things out for my brother. He doesn't want to come and live near me, apparently. It's too cold down here.
Oh,
It's too cold. He seems to think the further south, he seems to think the further south you go, the more snow you get, which is true, sort of, to be honest. Um, and no, penguins don't. Actually, there are penguins within 10 minutes of a house. I was going to say there's no penguins, but there actually are. It's pretty cold at times, but not Midwest cold. We
yeah,
don't
your
get
definition of
snow
cold's
like
not the
you
same as
get.
mine.
I mean, I complain about the cold, and you send me pictures of snow 4 foot deep, and I'm talking about frost that's gone by 3 o'clock.
To be fair, those deep snow pictures were of my parents' place in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, not down here. But yes, we can get snow.
It was terrifying, your photos. Hey,
Yeah.
so I just want to share a little story, and I'll probably keep this, look to keep this a shorter video. I want to share a story, and I'm hoping that in sharing this story, if anyone's listening, and I'm hoping that by telling a story, that if anyone wants to share a video to help explain maybe how growing up in the Adventist church has impacted their life, or a story that helps highlight some of the teachings that aren't strictly biblical. I wanted to share a story that would enable people to do that. And IQ doesn't even always have a lot to do with it. I mean, it impacts on things and makes it harder to learn new things. But the fact is that if you grow up believing something, you grow up believing it. So just to preface this, I'm aware that there are a lot of people that say that the church has changed over the last however many years, and parts of it have changed. So what my brother grew up with was perfectly normal mainstream 20 years ago, and it's now considered conservative, but it was just normal when I was growing up too. He's younger than me. So my brother's having some mental health issues, and he's lived with my mum for 20 years, and he's now trying to sort different things out, or people are trying to support him to sort out different things. And he probably really needs to go into some sort of a supported living situation with people that are like him, but he also wanted to try and live on his own, so he's been given that chance. So he was with his support worker yesterday, and he's had some problems lately with hearing voices. He doesn't have any official mental health diagnoses, but they are looking to try and get him one because that'll also help him with support.
Hmm.
And so he does hear voices. He's been hearing voices off and on for 20 years, and I didn't realize because he didn't talk to me ever till I asked him. And I said, "Oh, are these voices like your conscience? Because we all have that." And he was like, "No, no, I hear a real voice like when you talk to me." And I went, "Oh." So I didn't realize this till about 6 weeks ago because I'd never asked him. Um, and so he's been hearing this off and on, and he actually is on an antipsychotic medication. And his current support workers are going, "Well, if you've got no diagnoses, how did someone ever give you these medications and why have you been on them for 20 years?" So we're trying to get him some help, and we can't get him help because every time something goes wrong and they run him into the hospital to the crisis team because the voices in his head are telling him things. Um, so the last couple of times they've picked him up on the steps of the local Adventist church because that's his safe place, is the church. There was nobody there, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just where he'd pack up his bags and walk out of where he's going, and he'd go and stay there. So they found him there. They know where to find him generally. Um, and so he's sitting with his support worker, and I'll tell you the story. I won't use her name or anything, but I said to the lady that's one of his support workers, he's got about three. I said, "Do you have a minute?" They called me for some information on my brother because he couldn't remember because he's trying to apply for a birth certificate. And I said, "Do you have a minute?" I said, "I want to explain to you why it is that what my brother tells me about what's happening in his head and his brain and what he's struggling with and what he tells you guys when you go for assessments are different. Because every time he goes for an assessment, they say, there's nothing wrong with him and they send him home."
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was this. She put me on speaker, so my brother and her are listening. And I just wanted her to listen to a conversation. And so I said to my brother, um, I'll try not to use his name if I can remember not to, but I don't think he'll mind. I said, "When's God coming back?" And he said, "Really soon."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "So who's going to get to heaven?" And he said, "Everybody with a relationship with God." I said, "Excellent. So all the religions are going to heaven." And he went, "Oh, no, no. Only the ones that like go to church on Saturday. Only the Adventists." I said, "Okay." I said, "So what's going to happen to you when the end of time gets here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to be persecuted and hunted down, maybe killed." And I said, "Oh, who by?" And he goes, "The Roman Catholic Church." That surprised me. That wasn't the answer I was expecting. And I said, "Oh, and who else?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Everybody that doesn't believe the same and go to church on Saturday." Um, and I wish I could have seen the walk on the workers on a support worker's face. Because she's at university doing this part time. She's actually doing a master's degree in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So he's really lucky to have a support worker that's horrendously overqualified for the job. And as soon as she
Yes.
actually graduates, of course, she'll leave this job and go into a proper one.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to him, "So tell me, who can you trust to talk to?" And he went, "I don't know." So I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated that there are people lined up that can help my brother, that can review his medications, that can um, that can write a letter to say that he's eligible for funding to get into the supported living house he wants to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and all these things. But no matter how often I talk to him, and I can talk to him right before he walks in the door and say, "You've got to tell them, you've got to tell them. If you don't tell people what's happening, they can't help you." And he can't. He just can't. And lay it on top of growing up in a church that taught him that from the time he was a little kid. He lived with mum and he was her. And of course, once I took her about, probably she grew up with the same stuff and she believed the same things. And it got worse, of course, when the memory loss started, because then she started to get into that point of dementia and stuff where they get paranoid. So
Mm-hmm.
you had dementia paranoia on top of Adventist paranoia, and you get somebody that wouldn't let people in the house. And if somebody rang, she was always saying to my brother, "Don't tell them anything. Don't tell them anything. They're going to take us away." And of course, the potential was eventually they were going to take her away and put her in a home because we weren't going to be able to care for her.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm really angry. I'm really angry. I'm angry that the stuff the church has taught my brother is stopping him getting help. Um, and I know he won't be the only one. This is a church with millions and millions of people. He's not going to be the only person. And I know that this wasn't what I wanted to talk about this morning, but since it was on the top, I had this conversation late yesterday afternoon, and it was on the top
Mhm.
of my mind. I
Yeah.
thought if we could just do something short on it to help highlight and to help other people bring these issues up. Sometimes it's easier to see an issue from a story. It's so easy to look at it and go, oh, yeah, not everybody in the church teaches that anymore. So why is it important? It's important because the things we learn in childhood and the things we learn when we're younger are so hard to let go of. And then you throw in somebody that's, the Bible says a lot about what's that Bible verse about? Unless about the faith of little children, unless you become a,
Hmm.
and he definitely has a very childlike, simple faith.
And I think there's a matter of not tr
Mm,
feeling like you can trust anybody that's not part of the inner circle, part of your church you grew up in. But then there's also the aspect of, and I don't know if this is playing in with your brother or
mm,
not, is the aspect of pretending everything's okay, even though it's not, because you don't want the church to look bad. So I don't know if that has come into it for him or if his is more simply he doesn't trust anybody because the only people he knows to trust are people that were part of the church. And I think for some others, maybe in a similar situation, it could be you don't want to get help for any mental health issues because you don't want to seem
mm.
like things are not going absolutely perfect like they're supposed to. So I don't know if
Oh
there's
my
part
God,
of that as well.
there is. Oh, Carrie, sorry. My brain's so filled up with yesterday's story,
Yeah.
and I wanted to help them understand. I wanted to help them understand why they're struggling with things yes, what you said is completely true. And when you started talking about it, I remembered, sorry, I'll slow down. I'm talking really fast. It's an
Okay.
Australian thing. Everyone tells me Australians can talk faster than any other person just about on the planet. Um, so I can remember the first time he heard voices and he did actually go into hospital. And it would be probably 21 years ago now. Um, and yeah, I didn't even know. It was 2 years later when I found out he'd spent 4 weeks in hospital for hearing voices. Um, and people can say, okay, yeah, he's hearing voices and blah blah blah, but the voices he's hearing are telling him the things that the church had told him. And so he ended up in hospital because he called the police and told them he was a sinner and he needed to be arrested, pretty much. And I mean,
If that's the case, we'd all be in jail.
simplified, oversimplified, but yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't know for 2 years. And so my mum was away, she was working overseas, and he was living in a flat with somebody that had a mental health support worker, but he didn't have one at that point. And the social worker for the other person was researching who her client was sharing accommodation with. And it came up in conversation because he talked to me, he'd heard some voices and stuff again, and they'd told him fibs. And then she said to me, "Oh, did you know that your brother had been he'd been in hospital in the psych ward for a couple of weeks and he was hearing voices?" And I went, "No, I didn't know this. When did this happen?" And she said, "Oh, 2 years ago." And yeah, mum had threatened him and told him he wasn't to tell anyone. He wasn't to tell anybody at church. She didn't want anybody at church thinking that her kids weren't as good as theirs.
Hmm.
And when I confronted her about it, I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me?" All she did was yell at me and threaten me and tell me what was going to happen if I told absolutely anybody that my brother had been in a psych ward. So good thing she's in a dementia unit now because I'd be
Oh,
getting
she'd be so
murdered.
mad at you.
I've put it on YouTube for the whole world to hear. So yes, you're right, Carrie. It was definitely to be kept a secret.
Yeah.
And that does, oh my goodness, I hadn't even thought about the impacts of that yet on my brother, layering that on top, the fact that mum had told him for so many years, you can't tell anybody.
Hmm. I
You
mean,
can't.
there's so many layers to so many people's stories, and I think being able to tell this story will definitely help somebody because they maybe have a family member who's maybe not dealing with the same issues with the same background, but something similar. There's so many other high control type issues that people are dealing with right now that I think we learn so much from stories
I
that
was, yeah, I was telling a friend about this last night, an older friend, and she said something about, oh, not even that. I've talked to a few people about the issue of, what the church teaches about the end times and stuff, and Ellen White, and, because I mean, a lot of this comes from Ellen White's writings. It's not actually to be found in the Bible.
Mhm.
Um, and they've said, oh, but no one in the church believes in Ellen White anymore. But Carrie, the same friends that are telling me that are the same ones that sent me private messages on Facebook a year ago when I said I was taking my membership off the roll. Sent me private messages going, "Oh, my heart hurts for you. Oh, I just want to reach out and find out what's going on. I'm really worried about you. Why are you leaving the church? No church is perfect, blah, blah, blah." And so the thing is, if they don't believe what I'm saying and they think that they don't believe in Ellen White and it's not true and the church doesn't teach this anymore, then why are they still contacting me saying you're not going to get to heaven because, or I'm worried you're not going to get there because you're no longer an Adventist? I think people believe the stuff or they think they've left it behind, but then they say things like that to me that prove that they think they've left it behind, but they actually haven't. Because if they've left it truly behind, they wouldn't be worried that I wasn't going to get to heaven because I'm no longer an Adventist.
Right? Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's common, unfortunately, is when somebody will say, and there certainly are churches, Adventist churches, that aren't preaching Ellen White, but she's deep in the DNA of the church.
Yes,
She's just so deep, that it is frustrating, to try to, and we use the word disentangle from all of that, because you just every time you hear something, you're like, is this the Bible or Ellen White? Because I don't know anymore. I'm starting to
and
figure it out though. But
it's hard. I mean, if I've got a normal IQ. That last time I was checked and tested, it was above average. Though I don't feel like I'm smart. My other brother my youngest one used to say to me right from way back, he'd say to me, "Danny, you're the dumbest smart person I know." You're the dumbest smart person. And so
way to wrap a compliment in an insult.
even with what my ability to think about things, I still struggle at times. And I mean, there was a point even last night still where, I thought, oh, because I was talking to my friend and I don't know how it came up. I was talking about my brother and all of these things. And, oh, that's right. She was talking about the church being different now and stuff. And and I said, yeah, I saw something on the internet. Someone was talking. I think it was that Melissa um, video that you'd sent me that was done with Stephen Hassan, the cold expert.
Mhm.
And I love the way she puts it. She calls the Adventist church the biggest church that no one's heard of.
Mhm.
And that's been in my mind now because I heard her say that for the first time about a year ago. And it's just so true. And I was talking to my friend last night and she goes, well, because none of these people that are working with my brother have heard of the Adventist church. The town he lives in has four of them. They used to have hospitals here in New Zealand and all sorts of stuff. I mean, they own the biggest health food factory and they own so many brands here. They own well over a third of the breakfast market and well over half of the market for hummus and soy products, alternative sausages. They own all the brands. They're all different brands and stuff on the shelf, but they actually have brought them over the years and they own them all. They're just massive. People just don't have a clue, and so these people have never heard of it before. And my friend said, "Why do you think that no one's much heard of it? Everyone knows about the Mormons and everyone knows about the Jehovah's Witnesses and thinks, oh, those churches are on the cult lines. Why has no one heard of the Adventists? Especially when you consider that they started at the same time. I mean, all three of these churches, the Adventist Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons all came out of the same
Mhm.
evangelical movement within the same short period. And
Yeah.
I said to my friend, well, I can't speak for everybody, but I my belief from my life as to why no one's heard of it is because I was taught from a really early age that I might be the only Bible or the only God that anybody meets, God through me. And it says really clearly right there in Matthew, isn't it? That it is better to hang a millstone around your neck and drown yourself. So it's better off to commit suicide than to cause another person to stumble. And if I say anything that's remotely, even a tiny bit negative about the church, that might be enough to stop people
Mhm.
actually l- listening to God or listening to Christians or coming along and learning the truth. And they might not get to heaven and it'll be my fault. And so, of course, and that was just common teachings when I grew up. It was taught through pathfinders and church school, and the whole you should never do anything to cause someone to stumble. And oh, right along with avoiding the appearances of evil. So you had to always constantly check yourself. Could this appear evil to someone else, even though it looks like fine to me?
Hmm. Yep.
So how is anyone out there ever actually going to
Hmm.
hear the
Right.
truth of these matters?
Well, and part of one thing that's irritated me for years, I would say at least 25, is that the Adventist Church never puts their name on advertising for meetings or for any of the free clinics that they offer.
Yeah.
It's just kind of sneaky. I remember when my husband was pastoring his very first district, and mind you, we were 23 and 25 when my husband started pastoring. Okay, so we were just babies. We thought we were grown-ups, but I mean, my husband's a bit an old soul, so he's always been a bit of a grown-up, not myself. But anyway, um, we we held a little series of meetings in the community center. One of the evangelists from, I don't know if it was Amazing Facts or there's another one. Anyway, one of those organizations came and preached the series, and it was at a community center, and we didn't use our names at all, and we were told like we didn't even say like the first several nights that we were Seventh-day Adventist. And so you don't tell them that until you spring the Sabbath on them. So it's like you want everybody to become an Adventist, but you don't want to tell them that you're Adventist because some of your stuff's a little weird. And so you don't want to scare people off. And I
Well,
actually, so we got oh, we still get the little flyers in the mail for the local things, and it won't ever say, you know, who the pastor is, what church he pastors. Ted Wilson,
yeah.
the president, came to the large city near us and held a series of meetings, and we got the flyer for that. Didn't say anything about it, just said Elder Ted Wilson or something, and maybe where he lives or something, but all you had to do was Google it and you'd find out who he was. So this isn't making any sense. I asked somebody who's been a part of church leadership for a very long time, said, why do they still do it this way? And she said, just how we've always done it. So are you ashamed? So, and I think that's part of why people don't know who Adventists are, because we were told maybe not to over explain. Like somebody says, who's the Seventh Adventist? Who? So it could be part of it, but yet all of this secrecy is now making it so hard for folks like your brother to get help.
I'm just listening to you talk. I'm thinking, yeah, I can remember being told. I can remember I was on the front page of the newspaper way back in my early mid-20s. I was helping the church I was at the time run a stop smoking seminar.
Hmm.
And I've never smoked, so I don't know how I got a newspaper. There was me and a couple of other people, but I was helping, run that. Of course, you do church training. You don't have to be actually trained for any formal educations. You just do some church
No.
training and get a little certificate, and you're qualified to teach people things. Now that I'm actually a trained counselor, I look at that and I'm horrified. But hey, um, I thought I was cool. And I don't, yeah, I keep thinking, I never asked that question, Carrie. I feel in some ways like the church stole some of my questions. I got to a point where I stopped asking questions because I always got into trouble for them. Um,
Well, and I never
yeah,
asked that question until I had like one foot out the door
I
already.
mean, why does it have to be a secret? Why are you going to scare people off? Why are people going to be scared of the truth?
Well, and one other
If
thing,
you have
this is probably
good
petty,
news,
and somebody's probably going to call me out in the comments for it. That's
do it.
fine. When somebody said, and I catch this now, people will say that they're a Seventh-day Adventist Christian instead of just saying they're a Seventh-day Adventist. If you ask somebody what church you go to, or whatever, and they're a Methodist, they don't say I'm a Methodist Christian or I'm a Baptist Christian or I'm a Catholic Christian. Some may argue that anyway, we're not going to go. But to me, it's just like, so obviously there's question as to whether, so you feel like you have to tack that on all the time.
I've
Again,
been
that's petty.
embarrassed to be a
And
Seventh-day Adventist most of my life. I mean,
what's that?
well, not, I've been embarrassed to be a Seventh-day Adventist for a good portion of my life. I mean, I was never going to leave the church because I wanted to get to heaven, and I
Okay.
believed there was no other way, really. But it's been at least 20 years now that people would say to me, "What church do you go to?" or something like that, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm not a fan of organized religion. I prefer to call myself friends with God." And I wouldn't tell them anything else. That was it. End of conversation. No more information out of me. About God, yeah, but not about the church I grew up in and anything like that. And I certainly wouldn't, I never trusted it enough to take anybody along and
Hmm.
believe that they'd be nice. Here in New Zealand, we have, so I can't remember exactly. So we have a different system over here for watching television. And we have, they can get Sky TV, which is paid, but I've never had paid TV. We just have free TV. And so we have in the free channels, I think there's about 15 or 16 of them,
Hmm.
free channels that we watch. Three of them are Christian channels. Three of them are Christian channels. Um, One of them is run by just a non-denominational thing, called Radio Rema, and they do lovely stuff. They just do general Christian things, and they show a lot of feel-good Hallmark movies, and
Oh, nice. Yeah.
um, that's the only like different lots of different different religions can have their church services on there sometimes, and um, general Easter stuff and things like that. And a lot of their stuff's really nice. Um, and then the other two religious channels that we have, the Hope channel is actually run by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but it doesn't tell you that anywhere.
Right.
And they run more stricter things and health programs and stuff. And then the third religious channel is called First Light. First Night's run by 3ABN. That's 3ABN. Doesn't actually tell you what that is. You'd have to Google it. But that stands for the Three Angels Broadcasting Network. That's
Right.
the super conservative Adventists. And so while I'm trying to keep my brother calm and we've got COVID lockdowns and all those other sorts of things, and I'm trying to stop my mum from freaking out and thinking that she's, the end of the world's tomorrow, they're watching First Light all day, every day, because they're at home. And so they're watching episodes of Walter Veith. You can find them all on YouTube. And all those guys saying, we've studied the Bible and God has to come back in the next 3 years. There's no way the world can last any longer than that. And you've got to be ready.
Hmm.
Um, and stuff. So it's just
It's all consuming with so much I negativity, I think, with what's going to happen and the persecution and all that, which is just scary. Sometimes I think I'm like, well, what if I'm wrong now? But then I'm like, you know what? God knows my heart.
Carrie, I had those what if I'm wrong now thoughts last night after all these conversations, and then I'd have to go through it. And I'm like, right, okay, what does the Bible say? Let's reread Galatians. The old and new covenants are really, really clear. And sometimes I read it and I can't see it because I can only see what I was told. And generally, if I pray about it and read it again, I still can see it. So back to my brother. So talking about the, the Adventist. So out of three religious channels, the Adventists own two of them. Um, they actually did a series on the Hope Channel, which is not so conservative, called Finding Home. And they went through a lot of the different churches without specifically, they named the church and the town it was in. I don't know if they actually named really clearly it was an Adventist church or that they went to church on Saturday. But then they had all these members talk about their life and how hard life was until they joined the church. And now they've found this magical family and everything's wonderful. And I watched it and it was really emotional watching it. And I kept thinking, wow, I'd love to go to a church like that. Even when I watched the one that was the church I'd been attending with people I went to church with, I'm still thinking, oh, that just fills a place in my heart. I want to belong to a community like that. I went to that church for 10 years, but so outside of that, sorry. So we have a channel here called Aldesia. Aldesia shows BBC, it's all BBC stuff. And so my brother was in hospital last year. Um, I'm trying to get some assessments and stuff after mum went into the dementia unit. He was in hospital and he was doing really bad and he was struggling. And I know he still struggles with it, but it was last year that we had the conversation. So this is all in the same 6 month thing. And I said to him, look, I said, oh, I really need you to be your smartest self that you can be. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, but when you're worried and you're scared, you can't be your smartest self. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I said, so I need you to stop watching Al Jazeera because he was watching it obsessively alongside the 3ABN First Light
Sure.
channel. And I said, you've got to stop watching it. And then nothing's changed, and he's still not doing really, really well. And come back to it again a week or so later, and I'm like, you need to stop watching Al Jazeera. And I said to him, I want you to watch channel two. It's got light, fluffy stuff on it. I said, I want you to watch old reruns of Friends and all those like silly programs. I said, I want you to watch those. And then you'll have more space in your brain to show people how smart you are. And he still wasn't getting it. And he was still watching Al Jazeera obsessively. And so he couldn't answer a question about what day of the week it is or um, did you go to town today? Did you buy yourself something for lunch? He couldn't answer any of those questions. But you ask him what's happening in the Middle East, and it's like talking to an encyclopedia. It's incredible. He's like wickedly smart and fabulous memory, and he's listing everything off. This is what's happening, and this person's invaded this country, and this person's gone into here, and they've gone into there, and they dropped these bombs, and this is the reason. And President Trump did this, and he's just I was astounded, and I'm thinking, wow, you are so smart. Um, and so we got to talking about it. It took me another week to finally say to him, hey, what would why do you what would happen if you didn't watch Al Jazeera? And he said, I wouldn't know what was happening in the world. And I said, oh, I didn't expect that answer. And so I'm thinking, hang on a minute. And I said to him, but why do you're in a hospital in the bottom end of the world in New Zealand. I said to my brother, finally, why do you have to know what's happening in the world? And he said, because if I don't know what's happening over there, I don't know when God's coming back and I might not be ready. And I said, well, the Bible's got some clear signs for when he's coming back, and none of those signs are happening right now. He's not coming back in the next 3 weeks. So how about you stop watching Al Jazeera and you watch something light and funny on television and you give your brain a break and you stop worrying.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I said this is going to be a short conversation, and I see I've been talking for a long time about it all. I really hope that it helps people see the end result of what may seem like an unimportant theology.
Hmm.
I don't know. You're great at wrapping stuff up, Carrie. Take the last couple of minutes.
Well, and I think that we can get ourselves so focused. I, the phrase always runs through my head, we're so sometimes so heavenly minded, we're no earthly good. And I think we can become so focused on what's going to happen in the end times that we miss opportunities to live right in front of us, to
Yeah,
enjoy life, to enjoy our friends and our neighbors, and to spend time with our family and spend time in the presence of the Lord and not worry about his judgment all the time and not worry about um missing the signs of the end, and so focusing on that and so worried about who we can trust, who we can open up from, and then we miss opportunities to get help. And I think that that is so important. Um, I really hope that this story is going to help somebody. I'm sure it will, because you are not the only family that has to go through things like this.
mm,
And it's so deep in our DNA and so deep into this tangled web of belief that we have that is so hard to let go and let God take care of things for us, and help us find help. So, with that, hopefully we got this wrapped up. I think it was a great conversation, a good story. I know somebody's going to get something from it. And take care, everyone. Join us for another conversation with Carrie and Dani probably next week. Whenever we get it posted, we'll get you another one. Um, Please like, comment, and subscribe if you have a similar story you'd like to share, or even an asimilar story that relates to what we talk about. If you've watched our videos before, you kind of know what we're looking for. So, thank you for listening. Hope you all have a great day.